In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at some of the lesser known functionality when it comes to functions, and this especially has to do with arguments. And I'm going to be showing you some special syntax which allows you to pass in as many arguments as you want and the naming conventions for that syntax. So to get started, we're going to be going over the arguments keyword. And the reason we use this arguments keyword is in case we want to add an unlimited amount of arguments. For example, you'll notice this first when you're using the print statement. It will have this parameter called asterisk values, which just defines an unlimited amount of values that you can pass in. So if we get rid of this hint and we go ahead and say yes, we can add a comma and we can add another yes. And of course, if we go ahead and print this, we'll get both of those parameters printed out. But how does this actually work? Well, if we go ahead and create a function, let's say hello, and then inside here we can decide whether we want to pass in only one argument or multiple arguments. And to do multiple, you add an asterisk followed by the name of the argument you want to pass in. For example, you would probably type in args as a naming convention, but this can also be named something such as people. And when we go ahead and print these people, you'll notice that when we call this function and pass in Mario and Luigi, for example, we will get Mario and Luigi printed as a tuple. Now I have another example of this and I'm just going to paste it in and explain it really briefly. So pretty much I created a function that takes a language and people to greet, so we can greet them in the following language. Now it's important to understand that the arguments must come after the single parameters, such as language here, because of course the first thing we pass in will be considered the language and the rest will be unpacked as a tuple. But inside here, we first take the language and we check what language it is. If it's Italian, it will say ciao. If it's English or any other language, it's just going to say hello. Then down here, I unpack it and I greet each person as a normal tuple. And you'll notice that when we run the program, it's going to say ciao to these people. And of course it works if we add a different language, then it's going to say hello. Now, the more common example is if you want to add a lot of numbers. Here I decide to unpack the tuple and I provide a variable after, and the reason I provide a variable after is to show you how to handle this if you have the arguments before a normal parameter. So here we unpack the numbers and we create a list of numbers, then we sum it and we print it along with the text. But how would you call this? Because if you go ahead and add the numbers, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you decide to add text, the program is not going to register that we are calling the text over here. It's going to register this part here as the numbers. So what we have to do is go ahead and explicitly call it. So we need to add the named parameter, the keyword for that argument. And when we run the program, it's going to say 15 is the sum. Now moving on to something that's incredibly similar, and this is the double asterisk. And this usually stands for keyword arguments. And all this does is force the user to pass in everything as a named argument. So for example, if we go ahead and create a function from this, you're going to see I called it and I decided to call user number 1 Mario and user number 2 Luigi. These do not exist yet, but we are forced to provide names, and it can be any name you want. It can even just be name 2. And it has to be something, so we'll just say name 2. And when we run the program, it's going to return to us first a dictionary, which we can unpack, and then we can use that dictionary however we want. Now, there is a catch to using keyword arguments. For example, here I went ahead and created a function that says hello to people, and here I have the name of Luigi and name 2 of Bowser. And the first parameter is quite interesting because I decided to reserve the word name. And the problem with this is that the function is now going to think that this is a key value pair. So for example, if we go ahead and run this, we're going to get an error because we have two values that are named name. One that's already in the function and one that we created after inside the keyword arguments. So the way to solve this is to go ahead and add a slash. And what the slash says is that everything in front of these keyword arguments is going to be treated as a nameless variable. So if we go ahead and rerun the program, everything's going to work as usual. Now, with writing this, I'm going to also introduce to you what it actually does. So for this example, we're going to go ahead and paste in this function over here. And it creates a team of people and prints out that name 1 and name 2 are now a team. Now, the benefit of doing this is that if you have a function that's quite simple and you don't want them to use keywords, you can go ahead and say create team, and it's going to be Mario and Luigi, of course, since they are unbeatable, and it's going to force the user to only pass in the names. It's going to give you an error if you try to type in name 2, and you're even going to get a type error that we got positional only arguments passed as keyword arguments. So the slash after the variables that you want to pass in are going to be nameless arguments. And that's just to keep your program simple and to prevent people from convoluting their syntax. So again, if you run that, it's going to run perfectly fine. But if you add some keywords, it's going to crash. Now there's also the opposite, which actually forces people to use keywords. And this works by adding an asterisk in front of the variables that you want people to use the keywords for. So in this example, now we have the asterisk, and it's still going to print the team, but what you'll notice is that now we are forced to use name 1 and name 2 or the program will crash. And it still works the same way, except this time, no matter what we do, we cannot pass in Mario without the named parameter. And finally, I went ahead and created a function that combines everything that we've learned so far. So here we're going to create some work. It's going to take a name, which is going to be a nameless argument, and it's going to take one in the center. And this can include either a keyword or it can be positional only. That's up to you. That's what happens when you put it in the middle between a slash and an asterisk. And everything after the asterisk is going to be name only. And what this is going to do is print that name is working at job for that amount of hours. So if we go ahead and call work, you'll notice that Mario is working at Microsoft for 10 hours each day, so he can bring food home to Luigi. And if we run this, it's going to work perfectly fine. We passed Mario in as a nameless argument, and we did the same thing for Microsoft. But for hours, it's required that we actually add the keyword or the program will not function. And for Microsoft, it doesn't matter if we add the keyword or not, the program's going to function the same way regardless. And again, if we go ahead and try to pass in a keyword for Mario, we're already going to get a hint from the compiler that this is wrong. And when we run the program, we'll also get a type error. And now with that being said, we've covered everything we need to know about keyword arguments, and you should be the complete master of functions by now. But with that being said, as always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.